Welcome to your personalized deep dive. We're taking a look at that security newsletter you sent over.
Oh, yeah.
It's really quite a mix. I mean, everything from the FCC kind of scrambling to like bolster cybersecurity
Yeah.
to CISA suggesting these surprising communication tools. And get this, they even threw in a philosophical book recommendation.
Wow.
I'm already intrigued.
It is interesting how all these pieces kind of fit together, huh?
Yeah.
We're talking about espionage campaigns, AI, community threat sharing.
Mm-hmm.
It really does highlight how this cybersecurity landscape is constantly shifting.
Okay. So let's start with the big one that's got everybody buzzing, that Salt Typhoon espionage campaign.
Right.
This wasn't just some, kids in a basement, right?
Absolutely not Salt Type thing. This is a prime example of how sophisticated these attacks are becoming.
Right.
Infiltrating telecom networks, stealing data, even intercepting calls.
Oh, wow.
It's a major wake-up call, especially when you consider the potential impact on critical infrastructure and the FCC's urgent call for a cybersecurity overhaul.
Mm-hmm.
That's a direct response to this incident. It shows just how seriously they're taking this threat.
This makes me think about the NTLM vulnerability. It's like 1 minute we're worried about nation-state hackers, and the next it's something that could affect anyone using Windows to connect to a file share.
Right. That's the thing about cybersecurity these days.
Yeah.
Threats can come from anywhere and target anything.
Yeah.
And the NTLM vulnerability is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
It potentially impacts a huge number of users, many of whom probably don't even realize they're reliant on this protocol.
Mm-hmm.
It really underscores the need for staying vigilant and informed, even when dealing with seemingly mundane tasks.
So while we're waiting for patches, what can people actually do to protect themselves?
The basics are still crucial. Make sure you're using strong, unique passwords for each of your accounts.
Right.
And enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible.
Right.
It's an extra step, but it adds a significant layer of security.
Good point. And speaking of security, I have to admit, CISA's advice on using Signal and Matrix really threw me for a loop. Are they suggesting we ditch email and Slack altogether?
Well, it's not about ditching everything, but it does highlight a growing concern about the privacy and security limitations of traditional communication platforms. What sets tools like Signal and Matrix apart is their focus on end-to-end encryption and decentralized networks, which are designed to keep your conversations truly private.
So instead of our messages being routed through a central server where they could be vulnerable, it's more like we're communicating directly with each other.
Exactly. It's a much more secure way to communicate it, especially if you're dealing with sensitive information. Of course, there are trade-offs.
Yes, sir.
Signal and Matrix might be more secure.
Right.
But there's a learning curve, and not everyone is using them yet.
Right. It's like anything else in security. It's about finding the right balance between security and usability.
Right. And that brings us to something else I found fascinating in these CISO roundtable notes, this idea of product teams owning risk from end to end.
Yes.
It seems like there's a shift happening in how organizations approach security.
Instead of security being this separate department that swoops in to fix things, it's more integrated, right?
Exactly. Security is becoming everyone's responsibility integrated into the entire development lifecycle. And another key theme that emerged was the need for measurable security metrics. It's about moving from a reactive to a proactive data-centric approach to security.
Can you give an example of what a data-centric security approach would look like in practice?
Sure. Imagine a system that constantly analyzes user behavior patterns and flags any activity that deviates from the norm. This could be anything from unusual login times to accessing sensitive files outside of regular work hours.
Okay.
By using data to identify these anomalies,
Yeah.
security teams can proactively investigate potential threats before they escalate.
That's really interesting. It's like having a security system that's constantly learning and adapting.
Exactly. And that's where AI comes into play. This newsletter was packed with links to free AI training resources, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
It feels like AI is becoming something everyone needs to understand, at least at a basic level.
It does feel like AI is popping up everywhere these days. What are some of the ways it's being used in cybersecurity specifically?
AI is becoming crucial for threat detection, prevention, and response.
Yeah.
Imagine having to sift through mountains of data about network traffic, user activity, and potential threats. It would be nearly impossible for humans to analyze all of that and spot patterns or anomalies.
Right.
But AI can do it incredibly quickly, identifying potential threats that humans might miss. This gives security teams a huge advantage.
So it's not about replacing humans,
Right.
but about giving them a powerful tool to do their jobs even better.
Precisely. And the potential applications of AI are only expanding. Take Google's Willow quantum computing chip, for instance.
Yeah.
This has massive implications for cloud security.
Quantum computing. That sounds pretty futuristic. Can you explain what that means for people who aren't tech experts?
Quantum computing has the potential to revolutionize many fields, including cybersecurity. One of the key things to understand is that it could be used to break existing encryption methods, which would be a major threat to data security.
Wow.
But on the flip side, it could also be used to create new, even more powerful encryption algorithms, making our data more secure than ever before.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It could make us both more vulnerable and more secure at the same time.
Exactly. It's a powerful technology with the potential for both good and bad, and it's something we need to understand and prepare for. And speaking of understanding threats, let's talk about community threat intelligence.
Okay.
The newsletter highlighted the truffle hog threat, where attackers are using it to steal credentials to access cloud services.
Isn't it scary how attackers are constantly finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities? What can people do to protect themselves from threats like this?
You're right, it can be daunting.
Yeah.
But there are steps you can take. First, the basics. Strong, unique passwords and multi-factor authentication are absolutely essential. But it's also crucial to be aware of the threats that are out there. That's where community threat intelligence sharing comes in.
So it's about pooling our knowledge and resources to stay ahead of the bad guys.
Exactly. By sharing information about emerging threats and attack methods, we can collectively improve our defenses. It's like a neighborhood watch for the digital world. And speaking of sharing knowledge,
Yeah.
I have to admit, the book recommendation in the newsletter really caught my eye, The Hedgehog and the Fox.
I know, right?
What could a philosophical text possibly have to do with cybersecurity?
It seems a little out of left field,
It does, doesn't it?
but I'm curious to hear how you connect those dots.
That's where it gets really fascinating. The book explores two different ways of thinking. The fox, who knows many things, and the hedgehog, who knows one big thing. Applying this to cybersecurity, the fox might be constantly adapting to new threats, adopting new tools and techniques. The hedgehog, on the other hand, might focus on building a truly impenetrable defense around a core principle.
So which one is better for cybersecurity?
That's a great question, and one we'll dive into a bit deeper in a moment. It's not about one being better than the other. It's about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each approach and finding the right balance for your specific needs and context.
This is making me think, which approach resonates more with me when it comes to my own digital security?
That's a really interesting question to consider.
Yeah.
We'll explore that further in a moment. But first, let's take a quick pause. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Let's jump right back into this idea of the hedgehog and the fox and what it might mean for us in the world of cybersecurity.
You know, I've been thinking about this since we left off.
Have you?
It's such an unexpected concept to encounter in a security newsletter.
Isn't it, though?
Yeah.
It really gets you thinking. Imagine the fox in the security world.
Right.
Always scanning the horizon, adopting new tools, trying to stay one step ahead of emerging threats.
Yeah, they'd be all about agility and flexibility.
Right.
Always learning, always adapting.
Exactly. Now picture the hedgehog.
Okay.
They're all about building an incredibly strong defense around their core principles. Depth over breadth. Maybe they prioritize data encryption above all else, or focus on building a network so secure it's practically a digital fortress.
So it's almost like two different philosophies of security, right?
Yeah.
But how do we apply this to the real world? I mean, do organizations really have to choose between being a fox or a hedgehog?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is likely somewhere in between. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each approach and finding the right balance for your specific needs and context.
So a large organization with tons of sensitive data might lean towards a more hedgehog approach.
Right.
Really focusing on building that unbreakable core defense.
Exactly. They might have to be more cautious, more deliberate in their movements.
Yeah.
But a smaller, more agile company might favor a fox approach, prioritizing adaptability and speed. They might be able to pivot more quickly, try new things, experiment with different security solutions.
It's almost like thinking about personality types,
Yeah.
but for cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, When it comes to our own personal digital security, should we be thinking about these concepts too?
Yeah.
Are some of us naturally more like foxes and others more like hedgehogs?
I think that's a really insightful question.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's some kind of self-assessment we could do
Yeah,
to figure out our own security personality type.
I'd take that quiz. But jokes aside, it highlights something important, right? Cybersecurity isn't just about technology and tools. It's about understanding ourselves, our own behaviors, and how we approach risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also about recognizing that cybersecurity is a global issue, not just something we worry about within our own organizations or personal lives.
Right.
The newsletter mentioned the importance of understanding international data protection regulations.
Right. Things like GDPR in Europe. Are you saying that even individuals need to be aware of these regulations?
It's becoming increasingly important, especially as we work and connect with people all over the world.
Okay.
These regulations have a significant impact on how organizations handle data, and understanding the basics can help us make more informed decisions about our own digital privacy.
It's a lot to keep track of, isn't it? Espionage campaigns, vulnerabilities, AI philosophical frameworks, international regulations. It can feel pretty overwhelming at times.
It definitely can. But that's why it's so important to have resources like this newsletter and discussions like this deep dive.
Right.
It's about breaking down these complex topics into manageable pieces and figuring out what's most relevant for you.
So let's focus on that for a moment. What are some key takeaways for our listener?
Okay.
What should they be thinking about as they navigate this increasingly complex digital world?
First and foremost, I'd say stay informed. Keep yourself updated on emerging threats, vulnerabilities, and best practices. Resources like the ones mentioned in the newsletter, those free AI training courses, are a great place to start.
I've been meaning to dive into those AI resources.
Yeah.
It does feel like AI is becoming something everyone needs to at least be aware of, even if they're not going to become data scientists themselves.
Right.
Are there other things our listeners should be doing to stay ahead of the curve?
Absolutely. Practice good cyber hygiene. I know it sounds basic, but it's amazing how many people still neglect these fundamentals. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, regularly updating your software. These are all simple things that can make a huge difference in your overall security posture.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of community threat intelligence.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Can you remind us what that is and why it's so important?
Sure.
Think of it like a neighborhood watch for the digital world. By sharing information about emerging threats and attack methods, we can collectively improve our defenses and make the digital world a safer place for everyone. It's about collaboration and realizing that we're all in this together.
I love that idea. It's a reminder that cybersecurity isn't just about technology. It's about people, it's about community, and it's about working together to create a more secure digital future.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize one more thing, the importance of continuous learning. The cybersecurity landscape is constantly changing, so staying curious, seeking out new knowledge, and adapting to evolving threats is essential.
It's like anything else in life, right? You can't just learn something once and expect to be set for life. You have to keep learning, keep growing, keep evolving.
And that applies to cybersecurity more than almost any other field. It's a constantly moving target.
Right.
But that's also part of what makes it so fascinating.
Okay. So final thoughts. What's the one thing you want our listener to take away from this deep dive?
I want them to walk away feeling empowered. Cybersecurity can feel overwhelming, but by understanding the landscape, adopting a proactive mindset, and embracing continuous learning, we can all navigate this digital world with confidence and security.
Love that. Knowledge is power. And today we've gained a lot of it. So before we go, I have to ask you, what are your final thoughts on the hedgehog and the fox idea? Which approach resonates more with you personally?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I see the value in both approaches.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fox's adaptability and the hedgehog's focus.
Yeah.
Maybe the ideal approach is to find a balance between the two.
Okay.
To be a fox in our awareness of the broader threat landscape,
Yeah.
but a hedgehog in our commitment to defending our core values and priorities.
A hybrid approach. I like that. It's about taking the best of both worlds and applying it to our own unique situation.
That's exactly it. And that's what cybersecurity is all about, finding the right balance between agility and resilience, offense and defense technology and strategy.
Well said. I think that's a perfect place to leave it for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of cybersecurity.
It's been my pleasure. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what really stood out to you from this newsletter? Was there anything that surprised you or something that you just keep thinking about?
Honestly, it was that hedgehog and the fox idea.
Yeah.
I mean, who expects a philosophy lesson in a cybersecurity newsletter?
Right.
But it was so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that cybersecurity isn't just about, firewalls and passwords. It's about strategy mindset.
Even philosophy.
It's like they're saying to truly get cybersecurity, you have to think like a philosopher.
Right.
I never thought about it that way before.
Right. And it really got me thinking.
Yeah.
How do we balance those two approaches? The fox's constant adaptation to new threats,
Right.
with the hedgehog's focus on building that really strong core defense.
Yeah.
It's a tough question. Maybe it depends on who you are and what you're protecting.
Mm-hmm.
Like a big bank with tons of sensitive data,
Right.
they probably need a strong, like, hedgehog approach, right?
Right.
But a small startup that's constantly innovating, they might need to be more of a fox always adapting.
That's a great point. And maybe it's not even about choosing one or the other. Maybe the best approach is to be a bit of both.
Okay.
To have that solid foundation, those core security principles you never compromise on like a hedgehog, but also be always scanning the horizon, ready to adapt to new threats, like a fox.
So it's almost like a hybrid approach. You've got your hedgehog spines for defense, but you're also quick and clever like a fox.
Exactly. And I think that applies not just to organizations, but to individuals too. We need to be both adaptable and resilient in our own digital lives. Think about it. We're constantly facing new challenges online, new scams, new phishing attacks, new ways our data could be compromised. We have to be flexible in our thinking, ready to learn and adapt.
It's like we're all becoming cyber foxes in a way. But we also need to remember those core hedgehog principles, strong passwords, being careful about what we click on, not oversharing personal information.
Could agree more. It's about finding that balance between staying secure and still being able to function in this increasingly digital world.
So as we wrap up, what's your final piece of advice for our listener? What's the one thing they should take away from all this?
I'd say this: embrace continuous learning. Cybersecurity isn't a one-time thing, it's a journey. The threats are always changing, the technology is always evolving, so you have to stay curious, keep learning, keep adapting. Whether you're more of a fox or a hedgehog at heart, there's a place for you in the world of cybersecurity. Just keep learning and stay engaged.
I love that. Embrace continuous learning. And remember, we're all in this together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It really has. Stay safe out there and keep learning.